most people imagine that dating after 60 is either simple or impossible. Some picture it as a quiet chapter, two people meeting for coffee, sharing stories, enjoying companionship without the complications of youth. Others assume it's something to avoid entirely, believing that love and romance belong to earlier decades. But the reality is far more complex and far more surprising than either of those ideas. If you're thinking about dating at this stage of life, there's something important you should understand before you begin. Because while the desire for connection doesn't fade with age, the landscape around it changes in ways many people don't anticipate. I've spoken with people who entered dating after 60 with optimism, believing that experience would make things easier. After all, they knew themselves better. They had lived through relationships, built careers, raised families, faced challenges, and learned lessons. Surely, that wisdom would make dating straightforward, right? Not quite. One of the first things many people discover is that dating later in life isn't simply a continuation of what they remember from years ago. It's almost like stepping into a new world, familiar in some ways, but shaped by different priorities, different fears, and different hopes. There's often excitement at the beginning, a sense of possibility. The idea of meeting someone new, sharing conversations, and rediscovering companionship can feel refreshing, even energizing. But alongside that excitement, there's often a quiet uncertainty. Questions arise that didn't feel as pressing before. Will someone understand the life I've lived? How do I open up again after everything I've experienced? What if expectations don't align? These thoughts don't always surface immediately. Sometimes they linger beneath the surface, only becoming clear as new connections begin to form. Another surprise is how much perspective changes over time. At 25 or 30, dating often revolves around building a future, careers, families, long-term plans. After 60, the focus tends to shift. Many people aren't looking to start over. They're looking for compatibility, peace, and genuine connection. Yet even with this clarity, the process can feel unfamiliar. There's also the reality that everyone carries a story, decades of memories, experiences, joys, and losses. When two people meet later in life, they're not just getting to know each other in the present. They're meeting the accumulation of years. This can create depth, but it can also create complexity. Imagine sitting across from someone and realizing that behind their smile is a lifetime. You're only beginning to understand. Moments that shaped how they see the world, how they trust, how they connect. That depth can be beautiful, but it can also require patience. Many people don't talk about this part. They assume dating after 60 is simply about finding someone kind or interesting, but there's often an emotional layer that takes time to navigate. And then there's the question of expectations. Some enter the dating world hoping for companionship. Others seek romance, partnership, or even just meaningful conversation. Sometimes those expectations align, and sometimes they don't. It's not uncommon for people to realize that what they want now is very different from what they once imagined. If you're considering dating at this stage, you might already feel a mixture of curiosity and hesitation. That's natural. Stepping into something new always carries a degree of uncertainty, no matter your age. What many people don't expect is how dating after 60 can prompt reflection, not just about the future, but about the past. Old memories may surface. Lessons learned over the years may shape how you approach new relationships. In some ways, dating becomes less about impressing someone and more about understanding whether your lives fit together comfortably. But here's the part that surprises many. The biggest challenges aren't always external. Often they come from within, from fears, assumptions, or habits developed over decades. Before you begin this journey, it helps to recognize that dating later in life isn't just about meeting someone new. It's about navigating change, embracing vulnerability, and being open to experiences that may feel unfamiliar. And there's one particular challenge, one that catches many people off guard, that can shape everything that follows. It's something few expect, and almost everyone encounters. When people talk about dating after 60, they often focus on the positives: companionship, shared experiences, the comfort of having someone to talk to at the end of the day. And those things are real, they're meaningful. But there's another side that rarely gets discussed openly, because dating later in life isn't just about meeting someone new. It's about bringing decades of life experience into the room. Whether you realize it or not, every person you meet carries a story, not just the highlights they choose to share, but the quiet chapters too. The joys, the disappointments, the relationships that shape them, and the lessons they learn, sometimes the hard way. That history doesn't disappear. It influences how people trust, how they communicate, and how they approach new connections. One of the first hidden challenges is emotional baggage, not in a negative sense, but simply as a natural result of living a full life. By the time someone reaches their 60s or beyond, they've likely experienced loss, change, and moments that left a lasting impression. Some may have lost partners, others may have gone through difficult separations or long periods of independence. These experiences shape expectations in subtle ways. For example, someone who has spent years living alone may value their independence deeply. The idea of sharing space or adjusting routines again can feel both appealing and daunting. They may want companionship without losing the comfort of their established life. At the same time, another person might be seeking closeness, someone to share daily experiences with, someone who brings warmth and connection back into their routine. When these perspectives meet, it can create a delicate balance. Another challenge is vulnerability. Opening up emotionally is never easy, but it can feel especially complex after decades of building protective layers. When you've experienced disappointment or loss, there's often a quiet instinct to guard your heart, not out of fear alone, but out of wisdom. This can make early conversations feel cautious. People may reveal themselves gradually, testing whether it feels safe to share more. Then there's the question of expectations. At this stage of life, people often have clearer ideas about what they want and what they don't. Some seek companionship without long-term commitments. Others hope for a deep partnership. Still others are exploring, unsure of where the journey might lead. Misaligned expectations can create confusion if they're not discussed openly. There's also the reality that dating norms have changed over time. Technology, communication styles, and social expectations may feel unfamiliar, especially for those returning to dating after many years. Navigating these changes can feel like learning a new language. Beyond that, practical considerations sometimes come into play. Family dynamics, established routines, personal priorities, adult children, friendships, and long-standing commitments may influence how new relationships fit into daily life. These factors don't necessarily create obstacles, but they do add layers that require understanding and patience. And perhaps one of the most subtle challenges is comparison. It's natural to reflect on past relationships, to remember what worked, what didn't, and what was meaningful. But those memories can sometimes shape expectations, in ways that make it difficult to see a new connection clearly. Every relationship is unique, yet it's easy to measure new experiences against familiar ones. All of this can make dating after 60 feel both enriching and complex. What surprises many people is that the challenges aren't signs that something is wrong. They're simply reflections of lives that have been lived fully. With experience comes depth, and with depth comes nuance. Understanding this can change how you approach the process. Instead of expecting simplicity, you begin to appreciate the richness of getting to know someone who has their own history, perspectives, and way of seeing the world. Yet there's one challenge that often stands above the rest, something that quietly influences conversations, decisions, and emotions. It's not always visible at first, but once you recognize it, you begin to understand why some connections flourish while others fade. Because sometimes the biggest obstacle isn't external circumstances or timing. Sometimes it's the invisible weight of the past and how it shapes the present. And that brings us to a question many people don't realize they're carrying. What happens when the past quietly sits beside you in a new relationship? When people step back into dating after 60, they often do so with hope. Hope for companionship, understanding, and a connection that feels meaningful. And in many ways, that hope is well placed. Relationships at this stage can be deeply rewarding because both people usually know themselves better than they did years ago. But there are also subtle mistakes that can quietly undermine new relationships before they have a chance to grow. One of the most common is rushing. After experiencing loneliness or spending years without a partner, it can feel natural to move quickly when you meet someone who seems compatible. The excitement of shared conversation and the comfort of companionship can create a sense of urgency, as if you found something rare and don't want to lose it. Yet relationships need time to unfold. Moving too fast can place pressure on a connection before trust and understanding have fully developed. Another mistake is carrying unspoken expectations shaped by the past. It's natural to compare new experiences with previous relationships, consciously or unconsciously. Memories of what once felt familiar can influence how you interpret someone's behavior. A small difference in communication style or habits might feel significant because it doesn't match what you're used to. But every person brings their own perspective, and allowing space for those differences is essential. There's also the tendency to protect oneself emotionally. After decades of life experience, many people develop ways of guarding their feelings, sometimes without realizing it. They may hesitate to share openly, fearing disappointment or uncertainty. While caution is understandable, emotional distance can make it difficult for a new relationship to deepen. Connection grows through openness, and even small acts of vulnerability can create a foundation of trust. Communication itself can become a challenge. People often assume that certain things are understood, especially when they share similar life stages. Yet assumptions can lead to misunderstandings. What feels obvious to one person may not be clear to another. Taking time to express thoughts and listen carefully can prevent small issues from becoming larger concerns. Another subtle mistake is focusing too much on avoiding discomfort. Because life has already presented its share of challenges, it's tempting to seek only ease and harmony. While a peaceful relationship is valuable, avoiding difficult conversations can prevent genuine understanding from developing. Sometimes honest dialogue, even when it feels uncomfortable, strengthens a connection. And then there's the quiet influence of fear. Fear of repeating past disappointments, fear of losing independence, or fear of investing emotionally again can shape behavior in ways that aren't always visible. These fears don't need to be dramatic to have an impact. They can appear as hesitation, overthinking, or reluctance to fully engage. Recognizing these feelings is often the first step toward moving beyond them. What's important to remember is that these mistakes are not signs of failure. They're simply reflections of being human. Everyone brings habits and patterns into relationships, and awareness allows those patterns to evolve. The encouraging part is that relationships after 60 can also benefit from qualities that weren't always present earlier in life: patience, perspective, and a clearer understanding of what truly matters. By approaching new connections with curiosity rather than assumptions, and with openness rather than caution alone, it becomes possible to build something meaningful. Because at this stage, relationships aren't about proving anything or meeting external expectations. They're about sharing time, understanding each other, and creating moments of genuine connection. Still, understanding what can go wrong is only part of the picture. The deeper question is this: what actually makes relationships flourish after 60? What truly matters when both people bring a lifetime of experience into the connection? That's where we turn next, to the qualities that can transform dating from uncertain to deeply rewarding. After all the complexities, the questions, and the lessons that come with dating later in life, many people begin to realize something surprisingly simple. What truly matters after 60 is very different from what once seemed important. Earlier in life, relationships are often shaped by timelines: building careers, raising families, planning for the future. There's a sense of urgency, a feeling that certain milestones need to be reached within a particular window. But later in life, that urgency softens. Instead of focusing on what a relationship should look like, people begin to focus on how it feels. One of the most important qualities is emotional honesty. At this stage, there's little need for pretense or performance. Being open about your needs, your boundaries, and your hopes allows a relationship to develop on a foundation of authenticity. Conversations tend to be more meaningful because both people understand the value of clear communication. Patience also becomes essential. Everyone has their own rhythm, their own comfort level, and their own way of adjusting to change. Taking time to understand each other without rushing creates space for trust to grow naturally. Another key element is respect for independence. By the time people reach their 60s, they've often built routines and lifestyles that feel comfortable. Maintaining a sense of individuality while sharing time together can strengthen a relationship rather than limit it. Healthy connections allow both people to feel supported without feeling constrained. There's also a deeper appreciation for companionship itself. Simple moments, a shared meal, a quiet conversation, a walk together, often hold more meaning than grand gestures. The emphasis shifts from impressing to connecting. Listening becomes especially important. When you listen with genuine curiosity, you begin to understand not just what someone says, but how they see the world. That understanding fosters empathy, which is the heart of any lasting relationship. Another quality that matters is acceptance. At this stage of life, everyone carries experiences that shaped who they are. Accepting each other's histories without trying to change or rewrite them creates a sense of comfort and security. Perhaps most importantly, relationships after 60 thrive when both people share similar values. shared perspectives on how to spend time, what brings joy, and what feels meaningful help create harmony. It's less about shared interests alone and more about shared outlook. What surprises many is how freeing this stage can feel. Without the pressures that often accompany earlier relationships, there's an opportunity to build connections based on mutual understanding and genuine appreciation. There's room to move at a pace that feels natural without external expectations. In many ways, dating after 60 offers the chance to experience relationships with greater clarity, to focus on what truly enriches life rather than what simply fills time. Yet even with these insights, there remains an important reminder. Understanding what matters is only part of the journey. The real difference comes from how you approach each new connection, with openness, patience, and a willingness to embrace both the possibilities and the uncertainties, because ultimately the goal isn't perfection. It's connection that feels real, supportive, and meaningful, the kind that brings a sense of peace rather than pressure. And with that understanding, the final piece becomes clear: how to step forward with confidence and intention. If you're thinking about dating after 60, the most valuable advice I can offer is simple. Go in with open eyes and an open heart. This stage of life offers something rare: the chance to connect without the pressures that often shape earlier relationships. There's no need to rush, no need to prove anything, and no need to follow anyone else's timeline. Instead, you have the freedom to approach relationships with clarity and intention. Start by being honest with yourself. Ask what you truly want from dating. Is it companionship, shared experiences, emotional connection, or simply the joy of meeting new people? Understanding your own intentions helps you communicate clearly and avoid misunderstandings later. Take your time getting to know someone. There's no benefit in hurrying. Meaningful connections develop through conversation, shared moments, and mutual understanding. Allow space for trust to grow naturally rather than forcing it. It's also important to protect your sense of balance. A new relationship should add to your life, not disrupt the parts that bring you stability and peace. Maintain your interests, friendships, and routines while exploring new connections. A healthy relationship supports individuality as much as togetherness. Be open to learning. Every person you meet will have a different perspective shaped by their own experiences. Approaching conversations with curiosity rather than assumptions creates opportunities for deeper understanding. At the same time, trust your instincts. If something feels right, allow yourself to enjoy it. If something feels uncomfortable, give yourself permission to pause and reflect. Your experience has given you insight. Let it guide you. Remember that vulnerability is not a weakness. Opening up, even gradually, allows real connection to form. While it may feel unfamiliar at times, sharing thoughts and feelings honestly can create a sense of closeness that makes relationships meaningful. And perhaps most importantly, keep your expectations grounded in reality. No relationship is perfect, but mutual respect, kindness, and understanding create a strong foundation. Focus on how you feel when you're together, whether there's comfort, ease, and genuine appreciation. Dating after 60 isn't about rewriting the past or trying to recapture earlier chapters. It's about embracing the present with wisdom and openness. When you approach it with patience and clarity, it can become a rewarding journey, one filled with connection, companionship, and moments that remind you that meaningful relationships can flourish at any stage of life. So step forward thoughtfully and allow the experience to unfold.